Hi everyone, I'm Tim, and thanks for watching this Fade to Black guitar lesson. We're making our way through every Metallica track from every studio album with tabs, so if that sounds good to you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so that you can learn all of these awesome tunes. Let's get going with tuning. We're just in standard tuning today, so from low to high, E, A, D, G, B, E, just your typical standard tuning, nothing out of the ordinary. Now let's get right into our intro. The intro, obviously played on an acoustic, the rhythm part, and it's a 4-measure repeating thing that we're going to play 5 times, and then there's a 2-bar tag. So let's just learn this 4 measures that are going to be repeating. And the first measure sounds like this. Okay, so what we're doing is we're fretting a B power chord, and that's the 2nd fret on the A string and the 4th fret on the D string. And then we're going to have an open G. Okay, so our first half of our measure. So we're playing the A string, D string, G string, back to the D string. Second half of the measure. Okay, we're going A string, D string. Then we're going to put our pinky down on the 5th fret of the A string and then go A string, D string again. Okay, put that all together. Okay, so that picking pattern is going to be consistent through these 4 measures that repeats. A, D, G, D, A, D, A, D. Okay, so that measure one more time. Measure number 2, all that we're going to do is lift our first finger and do the exact same thing. Okay, so again, we go A, D, G, D, and then A, D, A, D, putting your pinky down on that 5th fret. So let's put those 2 measures together. It goes like this. Measure 3 is the exact same as measure 1, so you just put your first finger back down on that 2nd fret on the A string and do the whole thing just like we played in measure 1. Now measure 4, a little bit different. It goes like this. Okay, same picking pattern, but just completely different chord form, so it's a little bit different in that regard. So what we're going to do is put our 3rd finger on the 4th fret of the A string, and then bar the 2nd fret on the D and the G. Okay, so we have these 3 notes. Okay, but it's the same picking pattern. So we go A, D, G, D, and then A, D. Lift your 3rd finger to get an open A and go A, D. Okay, so now that we went through that measure nice and slow. And there's your 4 measures that repeat. I'll just put all 4 measures together nice and slow for you. Here we go. Okay, and like I said, we repeat that 4 or 5 times. And then we have a little 2-bar tag that goes like this. And then we're into our verse. Okay, so our first 2 beats, okay, 1 and 2, and what we're gonna do is fret an F power chord. 1st fret on the low string, 3rd fret on the A string, and we're gonna have that open D string. Okay, so then we go the E string, A string, D string, back to the E string. And then we're going to take that chord form that we had a second ago in measure 4 of our repeating riff, we're just moving that down a string set. So we're having the 4th fret on the low string, and then bar the 2nd fret on the A and the D. Okay, and our picking pattern for this is going to be E string, A string, D string, back to the A. That's our measure 1 in this 2-bar tag. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we move into our last measure. Okay, so what we're doing is just grabbing an E chord, okay? It's just an open E chord shape that we're fretting. And our first two beats, 1 and 2, and we're going A string, D string, G string, A string. Okay, and then 3 and 4 and. To tack on our last two beats, we're just continuing up that E chord, D string, G string, B string. And then 3rd fret with your pinky on that B string. Okay, now if you want a little nuance that's in there on the album, when you hit that open B string, you can do a little hammer pull from the 1st fret to the open string. Okay, so that last measure would look like this. Okay, getting into our verse. That little nuance is in there on the album. He doesn't play it like that live though. Live, he just plays that open B, right? He just goes, right? He just plays that without the trill live. Okay, so now that we went through those 2-bar tags, I'll just play all 6 measures together, 1 repetition of those 4 plus that 2-bar tag. Okay, now that pretty much wraps up that section, but I just did want to make one note about something that Hetfield now does live. Pretty much every time I see this song played, he's changed one single note in that intro. And that is in the very last note in that 4-bar rotation. We're on this A over C sharp chord. Right, we played it like that. He actually just, that very last note, instead of hitting that 2nd fret on the D string last, he hits the 4th fret on the D string. And that kind of is helping him get back to his starting chord nice and smooth. And it also gives it a really cool syncopation over the bar line. So that last measure, how he plays it live, is like this. And then he can flow back into that 1st chord. So I'll give that a quick play through the whole riff, and I'll repeat it just a couple of times so you can see how that works, how he's playing it now. And so on. Okay, so there is Hetfield's part for that intro. And now let's talk about Hammett's lead over top of that. Okay, so first of all, this solo is in B minor. So you can visualize your B minor pentatonic right there at the 7th fret. There's a couple of added notes, obviously. We don't stay strictly within this scale pattern, but that's definitely kind of what he was visualizing when he started creating this solo, was just starting in that pentatonic box and adding some notes for melody purposes, right? So we're going to slide in to the 9th fret on the D string, and then 7 and 7, bar it with your 1st finger. You might have to do a little finger roll to keep everything nice and clean. The 7th frets on the G and the B. And then back to the 9th fret on the D string. And then we're going to skip up to the B string and go 7, 8, slide up to 10. Okay, so once you're up to 10, we go 8, 10, 12, back to 10, back to 8, and then a little hammer, back to 10. Okay, so that first phrase all together. Okay, now we have this. Okay, so we want to do a 12 to 10 pull off, and then 8 to 7 slide. 8 to 7 pull off after that slide. Go down to the 9th fret on G, back up to the 7th fret on B. Now we're going to do a little hammer onto 8, back to 7, down to 9 on G, up to 7 on B, 9 and 7 on G. Okay? And now 7 and 9 on D. Okay? So our whole solo so far goes like this. And now we have this. Okay, easiest phrase so far, where you just go 7 to 6 pull off on the G string. Do it again. 8 to 7 on the B string. 8 to 10 slide. Okay, so again, that phrase. And then we jump up to the 14th position where we have a couple of quicker arpeggios capped off with a scale run. Goes like this. Okay, so we basically have a B minor arpeggio to start with. Okay, followed by a D major arpeggio, and then little scale run. Okay, so we do a little pickup, 15 and 14 on B and E, and then 19 to 14 pull off, down to 15 on B, 16 on G. That takes care of the first arpeggio. Now we jump up to the high string, 15 to 14 pull off, 15 on B, 14 on G. Okay, put those two arpeggios together. Now our scale run is 17, 15, 14 on B, and then 16, 14 on G, and bend and release the 14th fret. Okay, now on the album, that bend and release, he only picks it the first time. Bend and release. Live though, I'll see him pick both notes every now and then, you know, so take your pick, whichever you feel comfortable with. You can also experiment bending the string up. I notice Kirk always bends the string down towards the floor, but you could also go up if that feels good for you. Okay, so we put this all together. And then, okay, so that's just a little 14 to 16 hammer on G, down to 14 on D. Okay, and then, okay, so we just did this, right? So stick on that D string and go 14 to 16 on D, 14 to 16 on G, and 14, 15 on B. We're gonna do 14, 15, 14 with a hammer pull, down to 16 on G, and 14, 15, 14 on B again. Okay, so. And then 19, 17, 15 on the high E string. Okay, so all together. And now to finish this off, okay, so the last thing we did, right, we're there. So we're gonna go 15 to 17 now, down to 14. And then 15 and 16 on B and G. And then 14, 15, 14. 15 on B, 14 on G. So we're just mimicking those arpeggios that we had a second ago that we played really fast. We're just kind of slowing them down, playing 8th notes instead of 16th notes now. Back up to 14, 15, 14. Down to 15 on B, 17 on the high string, and then 15, 14. And then the last thing, just have a straight 3-note per string scale run. So we're gonna go 12, 14, 15 on both the A and the D strings. Now we're gonna go 12, 14, 16 on the G string. Move up to 13, 15, 17 on the B string. Then go 13, 15 on the high string with a little hammer pull off of 13 to 15, down to the 15th fret of B, and hit the 17th fret with your pinky, and that's that scale run. Nice and slow. Okay, the whole intro solo for you, nice and slow, goes like this. Let's get into the verse. Here it goes. So the fade to black verse riff. This is probably the most intricate rhythm part of the song, and it's also the part of the song where you could ask 10 different people to play it, and you're probably going to get 10 slightly different ways of playing it. And this video is no different. If you've watched a few videos on how to play fade to black, then this is probably going to be, ever so slightly different. It might be very small differences, but they're probably there. But I think that my approach really answers all of the questions exactly what's going on with this riff. So a lot of the questions that you might have will be answered as we go through, but a couple of things I did want to touch on briefly was finger style, and I'm going to talk about this again a little bit later, but just wanted to bring to your attention that I did find live footage of James finger picking the first 4 rotations of this riff before the vocal start, so before the verse, and then once the verse starts, he reverts to a pick. But the footage shows that he did entertain the idea of finger picking and he experimented with it. So I don't think that the riff was finger picked on the album, but if you feel like finger picking it, if you're comfortable with that style and you want to do that, nothing wrong with that, since he obviously did experiment with doing that. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to talk about briefly before we really get into it is that if we strip this riff down to its bare essentials, it's pretty easy, right? It's only 4 chords that every beginner guitarist learns. A minor, to a C, to a G, to an E minor, and then we have a couple of sliding diads that we tack to the end. But it's just those 4 basic chords. But unfortunately, to really nail it how it is on the album and how James plays it even, today, we have to overcomplicate it somewhat to really get it right. But, I just wanted to make mention of that. If you're a beginner, there are ways of simplifying this for sure if you don't, if you can't quite get it right 100%. So, that being said, let's get into this, and I'm sure that all of your questions will be answered as we go through it. The first measure, we start on an A minor chord. It sounds like this. Okay, so we start with an A minor chord. Let's grab that. First fret of the B string, second frets of G and D. Okay, and we're going to start with lifting our first finger, and we're going to strum through the A to the B string, just the 4 inside strings. And we don't just whack them. We kind of glide our pick through the strings slightly slower than a regular strum, just raking the strings. Okay, and then we hammer our first finger down, forming that full A minor chord. Now we keep our fingers fretting that A minor, and we do an arpeggio pattern, the G string, D, up to the high E, back to the D. Okay, so put that together, we have this. Now lift your third finger off of the G string to get an open G. We're gonna hit open G, hammer back down to the second fret, and then the B string. Okay, so put all that together, there's our measure 1, goes like this. And then we're into our next measure, the C chord. And that transition into the C brings about one of the little secrets that I wanted to talk about with this riff that will help you make it sound like the album and reveals exactly what James is doing. Because if you listen to the album, it's a nice full sound, right? But yet, if you watch him play, he's never strumming a chord and he's never picking more than one note. So how he's getting that full sound is when he transitions to the C, he actually is hammering these bass notes out of nowhere, right? His hand is fretting these full chords, even though he's not picking more than one string at a time. So he hammers down onto that root note, the 3rd fret of the A string, at the same time that he hits an open G string, right? And I believe that this is why a lot of people think that he finger picked this as well on the album, because we're getting these wide intervals, like, you know, from the 3rd fret of the A string up to the open G. A technique that's typically done with a fingerstyle technique, right? But he's doing it with just conventional fretting and a pick. So that's how he's doing that, is he's hammering these bass notes out of nowhere at the same time that he's picking another note out of that chord. So that's how we start that C measure. We hammer and pluck that G string. And then we have an arpeggio pattern, B string, D, E, D. Okay, and then we're going to do that little G hammer trick that we had on the A minor chord. Lift your 2nd finger, get an open G, hammer to the 2nd fret, and then you can lift your fingers and get an open B as we transition to a G, and we're going to use that same trick, hammer onto the root note of the G string, or of the low E string, getting that G note as we hit the open G. Okay, so we put our first 2 chords together, sounds like this. Okay, now we're into our G, and like I said, we're going to hammer down that bass note on the E string at the same time. We hit an open G. Then you can fret the rest of the chord. We don't have to worry about our 1st finger, but just put your 3rd and pinky down. And then we hit the B string, D string, E string, D string. Okay, now the first time through this riff, how we end it is we hit the 2nd fret on G to 2 open Gs. And then we fret an E minor chord, hit the D and the A strings, and then our 2 little dyads, which is an open B and G, and you want to put your hand down to cut that short, and then we're going to slide into 3 on B and 4 on G, and you want to do that from frets 1 and 2, so 1 and 2 up to 3 and 4. Okay, and there's the first time through that riff. Now that we put it together, let's just play the whole thing nice and slow. Okay, now that's the rhythm riff, what it is, and there's 2 more variations that you hear on the album. But before we get to that, I just wanted to talk about one other thing. The album is played on a 12 string, right? And I also think that this is another reason a lot of people think there's some finger picking going on, because it almost has this sound like this. Right? You seem to hear that E note ringing a lot. And, you know, it's because it's on a 12 string. Every time he's hitting this 2nd fret on the D string, on a 12 string, you've got 2 strings there, right? You've got this pitch, and then a string that's tuned an octave higher, which would be this pitch. So it's not finger picking involving that high string. It's just those 2 E notes ringing together every time he hits that D string. That's what's creating that sound, that... Right? So I just wanted to address that, because I think that using the 12 string has thrown some confusion into the riff as well. But if you play it exactly as I showed you, and especially if you play it on a 12 string, it's going to sound just like the album. Okay, now we've talked about what the riff is. All we have to do is go through a couple of variations. And all that he's doing is changing one single beat. It's the transition from the G to the E minor. We're just changing the beat 4 of that G going into the E minor. That's it. So the next time that he plays through that riff, he plays it like this. Okay, as you can see, the whole riff's the same. It's just that transition, like I said, from the G to the E minor. And we just have this little trill from the open G to the 2nd fret. Okay, so we start with that G chord the same as before. Now hit the open G and trill. So we actually have, 4 notes there. We hit the open G, hammer onto the 2nd fret, pull back off to G, hit it again. And then as we're into the E minor measure, we hit it even again. So it's... Okay, so that's that transition. I'll just play it again nice and slow for you. Okay, the 3rd time through on the album is the same as the 1st time. And then the 4th time through, right before the vocals start, you hear the last variation that he includes on the album, and that is this. Okay, so as you can see, we're just altering that beat 4 on the G chord, transitioning into that E minor, right? So we start the G the same. And then we come back to the B string, hit that one more time to the 2nd fret on the G string, to the open G, and then finish that off, right? So. Okay, so there's the variations that you hear on the album. Now that you know what those variations are, if you really wanted to play it exact, then just listen through to the album and, just plug them in wherever you hear them. But I'll just play those first 4 rotations that you hear on the album before the verse starts. I'll just play all 4 of those nice and slow for you so that you can choose to learn them exactly like the album if you want to. Okay, so now that we've learned the riff and the way the variations are on the album, before we get into the live version, because he's changed it up even further live now, I just wanted to talk about one more little thing that I think will really help you with this riff. It makes it feel like you're really playing the song and helps you see the logic behind it too, is to get the picking pattern right. Okay, so James doesn't really use what I would call a conventional picking pattern with this riff. More conventional picking is downstrokes on downbeats and upstrokes on upbeats, but a lot of the times he reverses that order with this riff, where he's going up on the downbeats and down on the upbeats. Okay, so like I said, if you really get the picking pattern, it'll help you wrap your head around this riff. It even makes it easier to play because after every stroke that you do, your pick is ready just to do the next thing. It makes it really nice and logical. So you want to really get this downstroke that we start with, right? But then right away, now we're on beat 2. We're going to start with an upstroke, up, down, right? And that's on 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3, and then we continue here with a down, up, and then we actually start the next measure with an upstroke, up, down, down, up, starting that measure 3. Up, down, right? And earlier footage that I've seen of them playing it in the 80s, they've done the dyads with downs. So how you end the picking on that riff isn't necessarily as important, but he's always played those other 3 chords before those dyads the same. Okay. So let's just go through that again. Down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, Okay, those are the strokes that he's using and that he's used for a very long time with this riff now. So I really think that it'll make it more enjoyable for you to play the riff. And like I said, you'll see the logic behind that riff too if you work on getting the picking pattern the same way that he plays it. So now let's get into the live variations. And once again, the live variations just involve the transition from the G to the E minor. That's the only thing that he changes. Everything else, the A minor, C, and for most of the G measure is the same as it was on the album. But here I'll just play a couple of rotations that I lifted directly from a live performance, and it goes like this. Okay, as you can see, he's really just changed more than that beat 4. He's kind of extended the variation a little bit on either side. So, like I said, no need to go through the A minor, C, and G's again. We'll just change, you know, the little variation transitioning from the G to the E minor. So, the first time through this riff in the live variation, he likes to do something like this. Okay, so we start the G the same. Now, instead of doing the little trill the way it was on the album, he just does a grace note hammer. The open G, quickly hammer to the 2nd fret, back to the open G, and then we're just falling down the whole E minor there, starting from the D string, right? We're even including that low E string before the sliding diads. Okay, so that little transition, nice and slow. Okay, the second time through it, he even beefs it up a little bit more. It's a little bit more complicated once again. It goes like this. Okay, once again, we start with that G. But we only go to the downbeat of beat 3, and then we start altering this on the upbeat of beat 3. Okay, we're actually going to triple pick that 3rd fret on the B string, then down to the 2nd fret of G and open, and just continue down your E minor like we did in the last variation, right? So the tail end of that variation. Okay, and you know, I think you're starting to get the hang of these variations by now. If you see any other variation that he does, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to figure it out now. It's just going to be some sort of a variation, very slight difference on what we've already learned. But there is one that I'll just quickly throw at you because he does this now live when he starts to sing. When the verse kicks in, he'll do this, and he actually reverses the arpeggio of the E minor chord. And here's one rotation of what I'm talking about. It goes like this. Okay, so as you can see, start the G the same. Let that high note ring out for a full beat before we hit the open G and D, and then go up the bottom 4 strings of the E minor. And this tack on those diads. So now that we went through that tail end nice and slow. Okay, like I said, those are all the best variations that I came across, if not all of them. If you do come across any other variation that you think is cool, I'm sure you're going to be able to figure it out pretty easily now that we've learned all of that. That's that riff. I think we finally shed light on exactly what's happening with the verse riff of Fade to Black. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, let's talk about Kirk's part that goes over top of the verse riff, and he's doing this. Okay, it's a simple part. All that he's doing, he's playing the same chords as James. He's just playing them in different spots on the neck, adding a little something to it. So he starts off just, and he does this finger style too, by the way. You can see live footage where he's just doing it all fingers. So he starts off playing the same chord as James, the A minor, but we're just going to do the top 3 strings. So 2nd fret on G, 1st fret on B, and open E string. Pluck those all at the same time. And then we're going to slide into a C chord, okay? Because James went from an A minor to a C. Well, we're gonna go to a C. This is just a C in the A form, but we're just gonna take the top 3 strings. And Hammett likes to play with his second, third, and first finger, not with the pinky. It makes it a little bit easier if you use his fingering. So we're gonna slide into the 5th fret on G, 5th fret on B, and the 3rd fret on the E string. Okay, so we're going from this 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. Okay, we're gonna go to the G chord next, but it's all the way up here. Same form, we're just taking that A chord shape, right? A that we took up to C, we're taking it all the way up to the 10th fret to outline a G. And again, just the top 3 strings of that. So we're gonna go 12 and 12 on the G and the B, and 10 on the E string. And then we're gonna play the E minor, right? So we're just outlining these chords, A minor, C, G to E minor. So our E minor that Kirk plays is gonna be on 7 on the E string, 8 on B, and 9 on G. Okay? So his part, again, is just 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then repeat it around and around. And live, like on the album, is pretty much just the same thing every time. Live though, he does play around with it slightly. The first thing that he does is when he hits this E minor, he kind of will mix the order of the strings up. Maybe the 3rd string, the high string, the 2nd string. Okay, so you could do that. The other thing that he does a lot live is he'll copy the dyads every time, right? So right? Another cool thing too is he'll hit those dyads and then slide a little bit too. So you hit the dyads as we've been learning them, and then and he doesn't include that high string that I hear very often. When he's doing the dyads, it's just the B and the G string, and then into that. Right? So there's Kirk's part, how it is on the album, and what he likes to do to vary it up a little bit when he plays it live. Let's kick on some distortion and get into our next riffs. So as you may have noticed in the performance, I performed the riff 3 times. The first time is exactly how it's heard on the album, and then the second and third times that I went through it, I put the variations in that they play live. And those variations that you hear live occur in the second time they play the chorus. So if you want to go listen to any video that's kicking around out there, you're going to hear those variations in there on the second chorus, the second time that riff comes in the song. Okay, so let's talk about this riff. We get into it by chugging palm muted E power chord for a measure. Okay, and that just coincides with our measure of the E minor that we had with the acoustic riff, because our acoustic riff was basically going from an A minor to a C to a G, and then instead of doing our measure of E minor, we just chug that E power chord with our distortion, and then we kick into our chorus riff. Interesting structured song that the chorus riff doesn't have a vocal. But we're then, once the riff starts, we hop up to an A power chord, hit that 3 times. Now we're going to come down and chug a down up on the open E string. Now we're going to arpeggiate a G power chord, 3rd fret of the low string and the 5th fret of the A string. Just pick them, don't strum them as a power chord, but pick them apart. Okay, and put a palm mute on all of 4 of those notes. And then when you come up to a C power chord, hit that 3 times. So that's the 3rd fret of the A string. And then come back down, do that little run that we had with the arpeggiated G power chord. Back to the A power chord. Okay, so let's just put those 2 measures together, nice and slow. Now we're back to our A, just repeat that A the same. Now we're gonna go to a D power chord on the 5th fret of the A string, and then up to the 7th fret, the E power chord. Hit that 3 times. And you can give it a good shake when you hit that too. Get some vibrato on there. And then have a little run here to get back to the A power chord. Palm mute the low E twice. Now go back to that C power chord. Then just drop your 1st finger down to the 2nd fret. So your pinky's gonna stay put on that 5th fret of the D string while your 1st finger moves back to the 2nd fret on the A string. So we've got, okay? Put a palm mute on all of that too. Okay, so now we went through the first 4 measures, and let's just play those nice and slow. Okay, and then we're just gonna start our repeat at that point. The A to the C is the same. Back to the A. This is the only thing that's different. Okay, so instead of going up to the high E, we're gonna go down to the low open E, and we're doing that by palm muting a G power chord, the 3rd fret of that low string, moving it down to an F sharp power chord. So just drop it a half step. Ring that open E power chord, and then you can throw a little slide in there for effect, which always sounds cool, and then just start repeating it again. Okay, so here's the whole riff, nice and slow, exactly how you hear it on the album. Okay, and of course on the album it just repeats exactly like that again. We don't get the variations, but let's talk about the variations that you hear live now. So the first thing that happens, let's just cover Kirk's part actually, because that's the simplest. He doesn't come up and hit that high E ever. He just drops down and hits that open low E. So that's really all that we have to talk about his part. So I'll just give that a quick play there for you so you see that in context. It's gonna go like this. And then he just repeats the second half like we learned it, but it's just that first E power chord, how it went up to the 7th fret on the album, he just drops down, plays a low E. And it sounds really cool between him and Hetfield, because Hetfield goes up to the high one live, while Hammett goes to the low one, and it sounds really cool. Now, Hetfield throws in the variations that are very noticeable. The first one that he does is at the end of the rotation, where we have this low E ringing for a measure. He just jumps up and fills that measure with, it's an E minor pentatonic fill. Very easy little thing to pull off. Okay, very basic rock lick that you should have in your arsenal if it's not already. So we start with an oblique bend. What you're gonna wanna do is put your pinky on the 15th fret of the B string and your 3rd finger on the 14th fret of G. Okay, and you're gonna hit those 2 notes together while you bend the G string up a whole step. So, and we bend it 3 times, right on the beat, just 1, 2, 3. And then what you wanna do that 3rd time you hit it, you're gonna release it and pull off to 12. And then come down to the 14th fret on the D string to resolve it. Okay, so that's that fill. So in context for you, it goes like this. And then he gets into the second rotation of the riff. And that's where he throws in another variation. Okay, so that variation that you hear him throw in the next time sounds like this. Okay, he throws in a little single note run there, and he throws that in on the measure of A. So starts on A, go up to the C, come back to A, and that's where we start the run. Okay, and it starts on the downbeat of 3. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. Okay, so we hit this, but instead of hitting it the third time, we just start our single note run. Hit the second fret on D, slide up to 4, then from 4 to 6, and then hit 6 again. Then we're going to hit 6 one more time, and then do some grace note hammers onto the 7th fret. Okay, there's actually going to be 4 of those grace note hammers. Slide down to the 2nd fret again and pick it one more time. And that's the whole run. And then you can pick up out of that riff with that little, G arpeggiated figure up to the C, and away you go. Okay, so nice and slow, just that in context again for you. Here it goes. Okay, and I actually have seen that with one minor variation. I'm just going to throw it at you because I think it is really cool, but it complicates it just a tiny little bit. It's to put a little gallop rhythm on this little run up the string. So it would sound like this. Okay, and all I'm doing is the same thing. 1, 2, and 3, and a 4, and a 1. So I'm just picking that string again with that little kind of gallop rhythm. Okay, I've seen him play it both ways. The gallop rhythm's really cool too. I like it, so that's why I tossed it in there for you. But I think we've talked about that riff enough. You've got it. Let's move on to the next one. The next part that we have to cover is the little harmonized line that comes in after the first chorus. And let's cover the album version first, but I think it's important to learn the live version too, because Kirk has drastically changed how he plays this live. So I think in order to really know the song and play it like they do, you'll want to know the live version. But album version first. The album version is pretty stripped down compared to what he's doing live. It's just a very simple melody all along the G string. So we're going to slide into the 14th fret of G. And now we're going to slide from 14 up to 16, and then 17. Okay, it's important to get that inflection right. Now we go 19, 17, 16, 12. 12, hammer onto 14, down to 9. Okay, so that so far is like this. Okay, now we go 9, slide up to 11, 11, slide up to 12. Back up to 14, where we're going to repeat 14 up to 16 and 17. Now to finish this off, we grab the 19th fret, bend and release, down to 17, then 4 bends on 19, and then just release it back to an unbent 19th fret without picking it. And that's the whole part. Okay, so the higher harmony part, nice and slow for you, goes like this. Okay, so there's the higher harmony, and on the album you hear a lower harmony, and that's the exact same thing, just move it down to the D string, okay? It's just a fourth below. So you could move it down to the fourth string and play the exact same thing, so that would go like this. Right? You could just move it down to the D string like that. It's hard to say exactly where it was played on the album. I'm not sure myself, but those are the pitches. You could even play it all along the G string again, just like we did the first melody, but you'd want to start it on the 9th fret. So there you go. You can choose to play it in either spot, throw it down onto the D string, exactly how we learned it on the G string, or move it and start it on the 9th fret to keep everything strictly on the G string. But that's how it is on the album. Those are the notes you're hearing. Now, let's talk about the live show, because as I mentioned, Kirk has really changed this. It's not a harmony part at all anymore. He's taken the higher harmony part that we learned first, and he's made it busier, added a few more notes, turned it more into a leady part. So I found a performance that I took note for note that they played in 1992 in Washington on July 17th, I think it was. So you can search that footage if you want to find the exact footage that I used for this. But he plays it virtually the same, except for the very last lick. There's an A minor pentatonic lick at the end that he changes virtually every time. It's never like exactly 100% the same. But I thought that this was a very strong performance. I liked it. So I copied this one note for note. But we'll talk about what he's doing, and then you know, you can have at her. So here we go with that. So as you can see, he starts off the exact same as the album did, right? Sliding into the 14th fret on G, up to 16 and 17. And then 19, 17, 16, 12. There's the first change. He bends that 12th fret up and releases it. And then got a little melody down that G string. We're doing a hammer pull from 12 and 14, sliding down to 11, back to 12, and then slide from 11 down to 9. Quick position shift, where he goes 7, 9, 11, 9, 11, 12, and then 11, 12, 14. Okay? Then he continues that idea up, 12, 14, 16, 14, 16, 17. And then we get into that pentatonic lick that, as I mentioned, changes every time, but this was a cool way that he did it. And we're gonna go 19, bend it, release, to 17, back to 19. Now bend 19 and hit the 17th frets along the 2 high strings. 20 on the high string. Then a quick little hammer pull, 17 to 20. Down to the B string, 20, 17, 20. A quick little hammer pull off that 17 to 20 again. And then 19 coming down to the G string, 19, 17, 19. Bend 17 with your first finger and release it to an unbent 17. Okay, so the whole thing nice and slow for you. Okay, so there is the live version and the album version of that little harmonized riff. Have fun with that. And as I mentioned too, that little thing at the end, right? That's the part that he changes virtually every time. Sometimes it's very close, but as I was watching live footage, I never saw any footage where he played it exactly the same. So you can really just use your A minor pentatonic scale. If you're performing this live, you just, use your A minor pentatonic scale and create some nice little melody. Don't make it too busy, but just, a nice little A minor pentatonic melody. You can't go wrong, and you'll be doing exactly what he does. So let's cover the next riff now. We're going to speed up in tempo to about 140 to 144, somewhere in there. And it goes like this. Okay, so we start off with a D power chord sliding up to E. So the 5th fret power chord on A up to the 7th fret. Okay, now we do it again. Up to 10, falling down to 9. So a G and an F sharp. All the way back down to the 5th fret. Okay, and then we get into our little single note run down the D string. But let's just put that together nice and slow so far. Okay, now we have this. Okay, so use your pinky, 9th fret on D, and you're gonna wanna go down, up, down, and then you come to your 2nd finger on the 7th fret, and you do a down, up, down again, fall down to the 5th fret, then switch to your 1st finger on the 4th fret, and then just one pick on the 4th fret of G. Okay, and that's the whole riff pretty much. The second time we just don't hit the 4th fret on the G string. We come back up to the 5th fret as our final note on the D string. So it'd be like this. That's the only difference between the first half of the riff and the second half, is just that very final note. Okay, so now that we've went over the whole riff, nice and slow, the whole thing goes like this. So James, of course, starts singing over that riff, and then the next thing that we hear that we have to talk about is the harmonized lead lines that come in over top of that riff. And once again, it's different on the album versus how they play it live, and it's good to learn both ways so that you really understand the song. So let's cover the album version first, and we'll give it a quick play. Here we go. I've never really seen this harmony part explained satisfactorily. I've never seen a tab that I think accurately represents what's going on. So I'm going to explain what my ear is hearing and what I think is happening. We play the whole riff, which is 8 measures, one time. The first half, we hear a harmony, a third higher than the root. And then the second half, that third harmony plays again, but we add a harmony a 5th higher too, just kind of building that before the vocal kicks back in and it's stripped back down just to the bare riff. Okay, so what I mean by 3rd and 5th is we're really just stacking intervals on top of this basic riff, but we're just thinking about the root. Right, if we strip it down to just the root, then we can start adding notes on top of that. And the first one that you hear is a 3rd. So we're going to start, if D is our root that we're starting on, we want an F sharp, which is the major 3rd of a D, giving us that major 3rd sound. And then we're sliding up to a G, the minor 3rd on the 5th fret of E. So we've got right, that's our first harmony. And so what we're doing is starting on the D string, 4 and 5. Coming up to 9 and 7, back down to 4. Right, and then this little riff, That's just a third higher again. Okay, it's just harmonizing major and minor thirds above the little rundown. So we're going along the G string, 7th fret to the 6th, to the 4th, and then to the 2nd. Hitting the 4th again for that last one. So the first harmony that you hear goes like this. Okay, and now the next harmony that comes in on the second half of the riff is stacked upon the harmony that's a third higher, and we're playing the 5th of the chord, and we're completing a full complete triad for the full harmony. So if we've got a D and an F sharp as our first two harmonizing notes, then we want an A, that's the 5th of the chord, right? And then we're going to go up to a B as the 5th of our E minor chord. Right, so now we have that full triad harmony. So what we're gonna play, come up to the G string and go 2 to 4. And then 7 to 6, back to 2. Right, and if you listen really close, on the album, he doesn't do this live. We'll get to how he plays this live, like I mentioned. But on the album, if you listen closely, you can hear that. He harmonized way up there. So on the B string, 7, 5, 3, 2, and back up to 3 for that final note. Okay, so that full harmony that's a 5th higher goes like this. Okay, so when you strip it down to its basic essentials, like they're just forming chords, right? So it takes a little bit of the mystery out of it when you see what they're doing. And now let's get into the live version. So live, Kirk holds down the rhythm riff while Hetfield plays what would equate to the lead harmony lines that were on the album. But he, of course, varies it up, and it's not like it is on the album. So I'm going to give it a quick performance play, and then we'll break it down. So this is just one example of how Hetfield approaches this part live, and this was taken from a Lincoln, Nebraska concert in 2018 on September 6th. So I've seen him play this, you know, many different ways. This is just how he liked to play it that night, but it'll give you a very strong overview of what he's doing. So a good thing to note here though is how he's starting on that 3rd harmony, and then halfway through the riff, he's going up to that 5th harmony, kind of duplicating that aspect of the album at least, but the rest of it is, you know, strongly changed from the album as well. Okay, so we start with this. Okay, so it's starting on the 4th and 5th frets of D, just like the album version started, just playing with that, the 3rd of those D and E minor chords. There's a little nuance in there that I picked up on the live show, a little hammer, grace note hammer here. Right, you can put that in there if you want to. We're getting pretty picky there at that point though. Okay, and then we're gonna hit 4 and 5 one more time. Then 5 with a 4 to 2 slide on the G string. And then we come back up to the 4th fret. And we pull off to the 2nd fret. And come down to the 4th fret on D, and then we're going to hit that twice more. So the whole thing so far together. Okay, and then we just have that same run that was done on the album. Okay, and that's just 7, 6, 4, 2, coming back up to 4 with the final note there, all on the G string. Okay, and now that we're there, we stay just like the album did with the 5th of those chords now. Okay, so we go 2, 4, and then 2 little grace note hammers from 2 to hammering to 4 quick. okay? And now 2, 4, 2, 4, sliding up to 7. Then down to 6, okay? And coming down to the 4th fret of D, it's a nice melodic jump, and he repeats that idea for a total of 3 times. So after that, we play it 2 more times. Okay, 7, 6, 4 down on D, 7, 6 on G, down to 4 on D. Okay, so that second part, taking it from the fifth, where the 5th of the chord starts. And now he just finishes this with a little slide down the G string again. Okay, he's pulling off between 7 to 6, then slide from 6 to 4, pull off from 4 to 2, and hit the 2nd fret one more time. And then there is a slight little open G that he pulls off to as he jumps back up to the main riff. Okay, so his live part that he chose to play that time live, nice and slow, goes like this. Okay, and then he goes back to singing over that riff again. And then the next riff that we have to talk about is just a little variation on what we've already covered, but it's the one that goes like this. Okay, so nothing really new to cover there. We chug 4 chugs on the E, and then the power chord on the 7th fret, another E power chord, and we're gonna hit that twice. 4 more chugs on E. That are 10 to 9 power chord movement on the A string, and then 4 more chugs on E, coming down to the 5th fret power chord D. And then we've just got that same run down the D string, with the first time the note being the 4th fret on the G string, and the second time the note being the 5th fret on the D string. Right? Okay, so nice and slow that riff, just in case you missed it. Here we go. And then we get into the final part of the song. We've got a rhythm bit that goes underneath the solo, and then of course the epic long solo. So let's cover that rhythm underneath the solo first, and I'll perform it for you. Here we go. So the entire outro to Fade to Black is an 8-measure loop that repeats around and around. It's just 8 measures that repeats until fade out. And as you might have picked up on the performance, there was 3 guitar parts on the original recording. There's underlying rhythm guitar that's easy to miss, but it's just playing power chords going through the harmonic movement of those 8 measures. So the 8 measures is, we're gonna start on the 7th fret of E, a B power chord, 2 measures of B. Move it down a whole step to 2 measures of A. Move it down a whole step to 2 measures of G. Back up to 2 measures of A. Okay, so it's just... And then we just repeat it around again, doing the exact same thing, okay? All the way to fade out. That's what that underlying rhythm guitar is doing. Now over top of that, we layer up our harmony. And let's talk about Kirk's part first. It's a little bit simpler. He doesn't change up the last few notes like Hetfield does, but he's also hitting the root of every chord. So it's a little bit easier to wrap your head around in terms of that. So Kirk's first couple of measures sounds like this. Okay, so we're starting on that B on the 2nd fret of A, come up to the 4th fret of D, then 2 and 0 on D. Okay, so we have those 4 notes. And then we have this little run. Okay, and we're going to palm mute the last 2 notes every time this run happens. 4, 2, 0 on A, and then come down to the 2nd fret on the low string. Okay, on the album, those last 2 notes are palm muted every time. Live, he started to palm mute all 4 on that rundown, but we'll get to that in the next chapter. So the thing you have to be careful about is the syncopation here. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and. Okay, so every other note is on an offbeat. 1, 2 and 3, 4, 1 and. Okay, so you got to nail those upbeats on the 2nd and 4th note there. But that's it. And once you've got that, you've got his part, because all that we have to do is outline that chord progression with the first note. So I refer to these kinds of riffs as forced riffs because we're playing the exact same set of notes over every chord in the progression. So it's a riff, but it's a forced riff because it's not, you know, all the notes stay the same regardless of what chord is happening. So the next time we're just going to play an open A to coincide with the A chord and then play everything else the same. And then we come up to a G to highlight that G chord movement on the 3rd fret of the low string. Everything else is the same. And then back up to A, because our chord progression goes from B, A, G, back up to A. And that's Kirk's part. That's what he plays live. He's responsible for that part before he kicks into his solo. And now that we've covered that, I'll just play it for you through once, nice and slow. Okay, and then we get into Hetfield's part. And again, he's playing pretty much the same thing every chord. He's just changing that first note. He changes up the last 4 notes though in the final measure. But let's go over his part. We are going to start with an open D string. Okay, and again, we won't get too into the theory here, but we're harmonizing for the most parts in major and minor thirds, right? So Kirk started on the 2nd fret B on the A string, and then Hetfield is starting with an open D, which is the minor third above that. So just so you can wrap your head around that harmony, that's where it's coming from. So we've got that minor third that would be in a B minor chord, right? Since we're in B minor for this section. Okay, we have those 2 notes. So Hetfield, open D, and then the 4th and the 5th frets on that D string. Okay, and then we come down to 2 and 0 on D, palm mute 4 and 0 on A. Okay, that's his first chord. And then, just like the first part that we learned, we're just going to change that first note and then play everything else the same. So the next time we go through it, we're going to start on the 4th fret on the A string, and that harmonizes nicely with the A in our first part, right? So we have an A and a C sharp, major third, right? So we just do that again. Right? Everything else was the same. We just started on the 4th fret. Remember to palm mute those last 2 notes. Then we start on the 2nd fret. Do everything else the same. And now his Hetfield's part here changes just a little bit. We start on the 4th fret again, then come up to the 4th fret of D, 5 and 7. Okay, and those last notes are 5, 4, 2, 4. And put a palm mute like they do on the album on those last 2 notes. Okay, so his last 2 measures. Okay, I'll put that part all together nice and slow for you. Okay, now you know that whole harmony part. That's exactly how it is on the album. They do change it up a little bit live, and we're going to get into that in the next chapter, but let's cover the solo now as you hear it on the album. The solo plays over the harmonized riff that we just learned, which is an 8-measure riff. So it's just 8 measures repeating over and over that the solo plays over. On the album, that 8-measure riff plays once just by itself, and then 7 more times to fade out with the solo. So we have 7 rotations of that 8 measures with a solo over it. So that's how we'll break this up. We'll talk about 8-measure sections because that's once through that riff, and we have to go through 7 rotations. Okay, so let's talk about our first time through the rotation. It starts off like this. Okay, so we're in B minor for this solo, so you can kind of visualize that B minor pentatonic along the 7th fret to give you a little home base starting point. Of course, we're going to be adding notes outside of that, but that's our starting point. And we slide into the 9th fret on the D string, up to the 7th fret on G, and then we're going to bend that 9th fret on G. And we're going to bend in that same rhythm that the harmony guitars were playing. Remember, it's that 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, and. Okay, so we're just going to bend in that same rhythm. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, and then we release, pull off to 7, back to 9. Okay, so we got this. Okay, now 9 on G, 7 up on B, and then we have 3 notes that repeats 3 times. So we hit 7 on B and quickly hammer onto the 8th fret. Back to 7, down to 7 on G. Just do that 3 times. Then we get to our next part, okay? So that next is 10, 8, 10 on B, then slide up to 12, 10, 8. Little grace hammer, so pluck 8, quickly hammer onto 10, and we go 10, 8, 7. 8, 7, 9 on G, back up to the B string, 7, and 9 on 7 on G. Okay, and there's our first 8 measures. Okay, I'll play all 8 measures of that first rotation, nice and slow for you. Now getting into the next rotation through those 8 measures, it starts like this. Okay, so we're pretty similar to what we've already done. 7 and 9 on D, up to 7 and 9 on G, bend 9, and pull up to 7, 9, 7. So just bouncing back and forth between the 9th and 7th frets. Okay, now there's one little nuance on the album that I really wanted to bring to your attention. When we hit that last 7th fret, he bends it a little bit sharp, just a little quarter step bend, right? But he actually does that 2 or 3 times in this solo, and I never see that transcribed correctly, so I just want to bring that to your attention. Okay, and then we walk back up the scale again. 9 on D, 7 and 9 on G, and bend the 9th fret, and then we get into this little repeating pentatonic thing. So what that repeating thing is the 7th fret on the high E string, 10 to 7, pull off on the B string, and then bend 9 on G again. So it's a 4-note repeating cell. Okay, now if you look at my picking, I'm using up, down, down, up, down with a pull off, and down. And I'm using that picking just due to where those 16th notes are placed in the beat, because we're starting on the final 16th note of beat 1, right? It's got this 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, a 2E, and a 3E, and a 4E, and so you start with an up so that you have a nice solid down on each down beat. 2E, and a 3E, and a 4E, and a 1E, and a 2E, and a 3E, and a 4E, and... Okay, so that's why I pick that lick like that. Now we're gonna play that a total of 7 times. We're filling 7 beats with that, right? 1, a 2E, and a 3E, and a 4E, and a 1E, and a 2E, and a 3E, and a 4E, and we end on one final pick on that high note, and then we get into this another repeating thing, and that's easier to pull off. What we're doing is 10 to 7 pull off on the high string, down to 10 on the B string, and back up to 7 on the high string. Okay, so there's 1 pull off, followed by 2 pull offs. Okay, followed by another 2. Okay, so it's kind of a pattern 1, 2, and 2. Okay, so 1 pull off, 2, and 2. And we just do that twice to fill up another 2 measures, so. And then we get out of that by bending the 10th fret on the high string up twice, and then we're down a little triplet sequence down the scale. Okay, so here's the scale pattern that he's using. And we're gonna add a note to that right away, but just visualize that for now. Okay, and all that we're doing with this sequence is starting on the highest note, fall down 3. Then go up to the next highest note, fall down 3. Go up to the next highest note, fall down 3, and so on. That's all that the sequence is you're just starting on every note of the scale, falling down 3. But he does pick every note, and as far as my ear can tell, almost every note is picked. I will point out where he throws in the pull-offs, but on this specific run, everything's picked. And you'll just want to keep straight alternate picking going. Okay, so just to go quickly through those notes, we're going 10, 8, 7 on the high string, 8, 7, down to 10 on B, 7, and then 10, 8 on B, 10, 8, 7 on B, okay? 8, 7 on B, down to 9 on G, up to B, 9, 7 on G, okay? Right, once you understand the sequence, you don't really have to go through every single note because it's just, like I said, falling through that whole scale pattern, starting on every note, okay? The hardest thing to probably get is a really strong triplet feel. You really want to have that 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And that's going to mean that you're starting the first beat on a downstroke and the second one on an upstroke, followed by down and up. So you're reversing your picking strokes every beat, right? Due to it being only 3 notes a beat. So that's probably the trickiest part there is just getting your picking solid and feeling that really strong triplet timing. Now, that's our next 8 measures. That's the second time through that 8 measure riff. So 2 down, 5 to go, and I'll play that second rotation really slow for you. Okay, getting into the third time through that riff, we start off. Okay, a little melodically. And we start off the same basically as we did in that last rotation, 7 and 9 on D. And then we do a string skip up to the B string, 8 to 7 pull off, down to 9 on G. And now 7, 8, 10 up to 7 on the high string. Then back 10, 8, 7, 9, 7. On the G string there, okay? So now we do a little bit of repetition here. Okay, so again, 7 and 9 on D. Little string skip up to the B string, 8 to 7 pull off, down to G, 7, 8, 10 on B. But now we stay on the high string, 7, 8, 7. Okay, now we do a little pickup, 7 and 8, into our little triplet sequence again. But he extends it this time, it's a lot longer. And I'll play through it and then I'll just kind of highlight what he's doing in certain places rather than going through every single note because like I said, I don't think that's necessary once you really understand the sequence. But I'll play it nice and slow and then we'll just kind of go through the highlights. Okay, so this is a lick that covers 4 full measures. And for the most part, we start off pretty much the same. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet. Okay, on that beat 3 of the second measure, we're actually sliding down to the 6th fret of the G string. So now the scale pattern that we want to have in mind is adding that note. So kind of keep this pattern in mind. Okay, so keep that scale pattern in mind and you'll get through this just fine. And that's all we're doing for the first 2 measures is just starting on each note of the scale and falling down 3. So start on the highest note and play 3 notes. Start on the second highest note and play 3 notes. And the next highest note, play 3 notes. And so on. And taking it down 1 more. And then we're at the lowest note of the scale. Okay, where we're going to play a whole measure of triplets just straight up the scale. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, and back through the B string as well. But that's just straight up and down that scale pattern. Okay, so far we've got 3 measures there, and here they are nice and slow. Okay, our last measure. Okay, the last measure is again triplets except for the last beat. He throws in 16th notes. So there's 4 notes in that last beat. And this is the only place where he throws in a pull off. You're gonna play 8, 7 on the B string and pull off. So downstroke, pull off, come down to the 9th fret on the G string with another down. And then 7, 8, 10 on the B string. Hit that high note again, back through the B string. A quick hammer pull from 7 to 8 on B. Down to 9 on G, and then we're gonna bend it as we get into the next rotation through the 8 measures, okay? So there's 3 rotations down, 4 more to go, and here that third one is nice and slow. Okay, starting the fourth rotation through that 8-measure rhythm riff, we have a lot of bending on the 9th fret of the G string. Goes like this. Okay, so we start off, bend that 9th fret up a whole step 4 times. And now we're gonna hold that and we're gonna pluck it twice 4 times. So it goes like, okay, we have that, we hit it twice 4 times. And now we're also gonna release it slowly. And then the 5th time, hit it, release it the rest of the way, pull off to 7, down to 9 on D, back up to 7 on G. Okay, so there's the whole little bit before the funky little rhythm. So let's just slow that down. Okay, then we get into this funky rhythm. Okay, and it's really not very hard what's going on. What makes it difficult is the syncopation, because it's kind of occurring in a different part of the beat every time. But all that you really want to do is have 4 chucks followed by a hit on the barred 7th frets on the G and the B. So it's going to be chugga chugga boom, chugga chugga boom, chugga chugga boom, and then one more chugga chugga at the end. So it's a kind of a thing that repeats 3 times plus the chucks at the end. And the difficult thing, like I said, is the syncopation. We come out of that other one that, right? It was 4 E and 1 and a 2 E and 3 E and a 4 and a 1 E and 2 E and a. Okay, so that's the timing that you really have to understand to get through that part cleanly. 4 E and 1 and a 2 E and 3 E and a 4 and a 1 E and 2 E and a, and then we're gonna get into our next little bit. There's just one thing I wanted to draw attention to. If you're looking at the tab and you're saying, oh, it's not exactly what I'm saying, it's because my tab, I'm trying to be very accurate with exactly what I heard on the album. And on the album, I believe he was probably just going for exactly what I was showing you. But on the 3rd time, instead of going 4 straight chucks, he kind of was starting to put pressure on the 7th fret. So it started to go. And so I've got it notated as more hits on that 7th fret. Okay, so that's why I've got it notated like that in the tab instead of just straight. Okay, just for those of you that are, savvy to that and have clued into that. Okay, now. Okay, so we've bend the 10th fret on the B string 3 times. And then we go 10, 7 pull off. And come down to the 9th fret on G. Back up to 7 and 8 on B. Then a little hammer pull from 7 and 8. Coming down to the 9 and 7 on G. 9 on D. Back up to the 7th fret on G. And we're gonna nudge it a little bit, that 1/4 step bend. Remember we had that before in the solo? Well, he's doing that again here, so. Okay, and then little pick up into our final triplet run, 9 on D, 7 on G, and then, okay, so we've got kind of the same sort of sequence that we've had before here in the past. 9, 7 on G, down to 9 on D, then back up to the G string 7, 9, 7 on D, then 9, 7 on D, down to 9 on A, back up to 7 on D, 9, 7 on A, 9, 7 down to 5, and then 7, 5 pull off, down to the 7th fret on A, or on E, sorry, back up to 5 on A. Okay, so 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 E and okay? Now, it would have worked really well if he had just stuck with all of triplets and we would have ended on a strong downbeat on 3. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3, right? But on the album, he sped up. It could be an accident. Maybe he got excited, oh yeah, I'm getting to the next part because it's getting into the cool little triad type thing, right? So he might have sped up, getting a little bit excited. But either way, it's 16ths on the album, right? A little bit faster, those final 4 notes. Okay, so there is rotation number 4 through the 8 measure rhythm riff. So I'll play them nice and slow. Here we go. Now, rotation 5 through our 8 measures is one of the flashier bits of the solo, but as you'll see, once you get the hang of the pull-off patterns, it's probably one of the easier sections to pull off, really. It's not as bad as you would think. So, okay, we start with that. And what we're doing is we start with a little pickup note on the 12th fret of B, and then we get into our pattern. So you want to hit that one note first before you get into this pattern. But our pattern is pull off from 15 to 12 on the high E string, and then go down to 12 on B, and up to 12 on the E string. This is probably the trickiest pattern of the whole little pull-off section, climbing up the strings here, because we have to do a lot of work with our first finger to kind of keep it clean. You don't want to just bar it and get those ringing together. If you just bar, it's going to sound like everything will kind of ring together like that. It's not going to sound very nice. You're going to want to, you're going to have to work at flexing the knuckle on that first finger so that as one string is ringing, the one below it's not. And as you come back up, right, they're not, you're keeping them clean. Only one string is ringing at a time. Okay, so we've got that 15 to 12 pull off. Come down to the B string, 12, back up to the high string. And now we go 15 to 12 pull off again, followed by 14 to 12 pull off. And then 12 and 12 on the B and the E. And then 15 to 14 again. Okay, so 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and then just do it again for measure 2. Okay, and then we jump up. This is just strictly a 4-note thing that's repeating 8 times to make up the 2 measures. What we do is 17 to 14 pull off on the high string, come down to 15 on B, back up to 14 on the high string. And that's just 1 E and so we're going to do that 8 times. Okay, jump up again here, 19 to 15 pull off, down to 17 on B, back up to 15. Now 19 to 15 pull off, 17 to 15 pull off, and back down to 17 on B, and back up to the high string. And then just repeat that again for another measure. Okay, and now we jump up one more time. Okay, we're going to go 21 to 17 pull off, down to 19 on B, back up to 17. And again, we're just going to play that 4 notes 8 times. Okay, so that's the whole rotation through, and we're going to start the next rotation with bending on the 22nd fret. Okay, but nice and slow through that little section, goes like this. Now getting into our second last rotation through those 8 measures, we're going to start on the 22nd fret, bend it up, and we're going to hit it 8 times. And then, as it's bent up, you hit it one more time and quickly drop it, go to the 19th fret. And then we get into this same triplet sequence that we had before. Okay, but we're just up an octave higher. It's actually the same notes as what we had here. We're just up an octave higher. But again, it's an extended run, and we're going to fall down the G string, okay? Now, one thing that I wanted to address about that run too is I've seen a lot of tabs where they've got those notes just placed down the high E string, which is fine if that's how you want to play it. But I believe that he fell down as I've notated it and then fell down the G string because that note on the album has a bit of a change of timbre and is not quite as clean as the rest of the notes, and that's exactly what I would expect to hear on a string change. So that E note that he hits there on the 21st fret of the G string, that's where on the album there's that little bit of a timbral change, and it coincides with what, like I said, what I would expect to hear if he was changing strings at that point. That's why I believe that I've notated it correctly, and he's falling down the G string. Okay, but again, just keep that same scale pattern in mind that we went through before. It doesn't matter what octave, right? We're playing that same thing that we had down there. We're playing it right in just an octave higher. And we're falling down the same thing. Start on the high note and fall down 3. Next note, fall down 3, okay? And now at that point, that's where it changes. You're gonna wanna hit the 19th fret, 18, fall down to 16, 18, 16, 14, 16, 14, 12, 14, 12, 11, 12, 11, 9, 11, 9, 7. And here, he pulls off 9, 7, down to 9 on D, and then 7 on G. And you're gonna bend that, just slightly nudge it again like we've done twice before in the solo. And then quick little pull off between 9 and 7. And then this time it is a trem pick on that. We're gonna bend the 9th fret on G, trem pick it. And you can put a little palm mute on it too. And you're gonna trem pick it for a measure and a half, hitting it again right on beat 3 of the next measure. So you kind of think of it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And then we're gonna hit the 7th fret on the B string as we get into our last rotation through that 8 measures. So, second last rotation, here we go nice and slow. Okay, getting into our last rotation through those 8 measures, we have another repeating lick. Okay, all that it is bending the 10th fret on B, and then 10, 7 pull off. And that's just 1 and we're gonna do that 8 times, filling up 2 measures. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. Now we get into an extended lick. He's just gonna play 16th notes until fade out pretty much. Okay, and on it goes, but it's such a big lick, let's break it up. We'll just do a measure at a time. So our first measure of this, okay, there's our first measure. So what we're doing is just 10, 7 pull-offs on the 2 high strings. And then we're just gonna nudge. It's not a full step bend on the album, right? It's just a quick little nudge, maybe half a step on that 9th fret of G. Back up to the B string, 7, 10, 7 pull-off. Down to G, 9, 7 pull-off. Down to D9, back up to 7 on G, pull off, and then pull off 9, 7 on D. And there's our first measure. Okay, our next measure. Okay, so we start off by double picking that 7th fret that we ended on before on the D string. Pull off again from 9 to 7. Come down to the A string, 9, 8, 7, then down to 5. Now 7, 5 pull off, down to 7 on the low string, back up to 5 on the A string, slide from 7 to 9, and then hit the 7th fret twice on that D string again. Okay, so let's put both of those measures that we've learned now together nice and slow. It goes like this. Okay, our next measure of the lick. Okay, now I should point out too that as we're learning this and breaking it down measure by measure, it doesn't have much of a flow, but as you work on it, you'll see the logic behind it. It's very natural and makes a lot of sense as you put the whole thing together and play it, right? It's got this. It just keeps kind of climbing higher and higher, and it feels quite nice and logical. So, keep working on that and it will come together for you. But to cover this, we're going to slide from 9 to 12 on the D string, up to the G string, hit the 9th fret twice, and then 11 to 14 slide, up to the B string, hit the 12th fret twice. So we have this so far. Okay, now stay on the B string, 13 to 12 pull off, down to the 14th fret on G, back up to the B string, 12, 13, 15, up to the high string, 12, and then we're going to hit the 15th fret twice as we get into our final measure. But let's just put those 3 measures together quick, and here we go with that. Okay, final measure in this lick that we really have to cover. It's already, not much to talk about because it's very similar to the pattern that we already had with the little pull-offs, flashy little thing that we had up the neck. Okay, all that it is just a repeating pull-off lick, 15 to 12 on the high string, coming down to 15 on B, back up to the high string. And then we do that twice, and twice more. And that's it. So we just have 1 pull-off followed by 2. And another 2. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Okay, and then to finish this off, what you hear, the last thing before fade out. 2 measures of an oblique bend. Put your pinky on the 15th fret of B, the 3rd finger on the 14th fret of G. You're going to play those notes together and just bend the 14th fret of G up a whole step. And do that 8 times. Which is the final 2 measures of that rotation through the 8 measures. And now you know why the album fades exactly at that point and you can't hear anymore, because that's where it just naturally is going to go into the next rotation of that rhythm riff, right? Okay, so our last time through our 8 measure rhythm riff, here it goes, nice and slow for you. And there you go, the epic solo uncovered, every note exactly as it was played on the album. Let's talk about how they finish this off live, because it's a little bit different. It fades out on the album, obviously, and they can't do that live. So they've changed it up a little bit. Let's go over that. Now, as you no doubt noticed in that performance, Hetfield's rhythm underneath the outro part of the solo has more going on in it than the album version did. Live, they play at least the last rotation through that 8 measures double time. I've seen them play the last 2 rotations in double time as well, but be that as it may, at least the last rotation is double time. So I played that last rotation for you, and then the outro as they do it live. Now, bear in mind that outro is free time, a lot of it. So the timings that I've notated are just the way they chose to play it that night. And I've got the links down below for you because I don't know where they played this show. There's a video out there that has like 45 million views on it. And it just says, you know, awesome HD quality, but it is a good quality video. I like the performance. So I just stole the ending of that and tabbed it exactly. So no matter what they do night to night, it's pretty much the same. The ideas are all the same, but the timings will change a little bit because it's mostly free time and they're just kind of feeling it, right? So let's talk about Hetfield's double time rhythm part. It sounds like this, the first couple of measures. Okay, so it's pretty much the same riff as before. We're just filling in the gaps, right? Rather than holding these notes out, we're filling them in with 4 hits on the open D. So we hit open D and then 4 hits on it with a palm mute. And then we go up to the 4th fret with 4 more hits on that open D. And up to the 5th fret, open D, back to the 4th fret, open D, and then the 2-0 and then 4-0 on A, right? That rundown as it was on the album. So we put all that together. Here it is nice and slow. Okay, and that's where the double time comes from. He's just beefing up the part, making it, you know, sound more aggressive by doing that. So up to speed. Okay, and then we do the same thing just with a new note. Over top the next chord, he starts on the 4th fret of the A string. So we just hit that and then chug on that 4 times and then up to 4 and 5 on the D string. Back to that 4th fret on the A string between them. So it's like this with the same rundown. And then we do the same thing with the 2nd fret on the A string. And then just the same notes as before. Okay, and then the final measure. So it changes a little bit from the album. We keep that double time thing going because we're back on the 4th fret of the A string for that final chord, right? And then there's a little hammer onto the 7th fret of that D string. We pick it again and then have that little run the same way it was on the album, 5, 4, 2, 4. Okay, so his whole double time rhythm part goes like this. Okay, so, and depending on if you're playing this live or whatnot, you might want to, you and your bandmates might decide to play a double time twice through, just repeat that exactly the same. Okay, now let's just talk about how to build up into that, because you don't have to go directly from the old rotation like right? You don't have to go directly from one into the other. You can kind of build it a bit. So the performance that I snagged this from, he does that, and he does it really nicely too. So he plays the first 2 chords the same as it was on the album, just. And then we start building. And then he gets into the double time. So the first half of the riff is just normal. The second half, he starts building it, okay? So let's just talk about that quick build. We're still basically outlining the same notes. We're just preceding it with 1 extra hit. So instead of just going from 2 to 4, we'll put in an extra 2. So 2, 2, 4, 4, 5, and then he goes 5, 5. There's a little grace note hammer back to 5. And then 4, 2, 0, down to the A string, 4, 0. There's an extra note in that run. There's 5 there instead of 4, right? He's always just been doing that. Now he's starting on the 4th fret. So that's a little nuance there that's pretty cool. So that chord to build it up. And now the last chord. Right, that's an easier one. We just hit each note twice. So twice the 4th fret on the A string, up to D4 twice, 5 twice, 7 twice, and then our little rundown 5, 4, 2, 4. Okay, so that whole build up nice and slow. And then we're into the double time. Okay, so there's the double time section up to the outro. Now let's just talk about his part through the whole, you know, train wreck ending that they do. It seems really chaotic and nuts, but they keep the underlying harmony the same. Once you understand the chord progression, it's really easy to remember and get through. So he does his double time thing. And then he hits that B power chord, lets it ring out. Okay, he's sticking with the same chord progression. He slides up to the 5th fret D and then hits an A power chord. And then we're gonna do a G power chord preceded by the 2nd fret on that low string, an F sharp. And then we slide up to the 5th fret A quick and another A power chord. Okay, so after his double time bit, and then that's how he finishes off. So we're going to hit the 2nd fret on the low string one more time. And then we get into what he plays for the underneath the solo. We just have it play it really slow, free timey. So 0 on the D string, 4th fret. But instead of going up to the 5th fret, we're going to bend the 4th fret half step and release it, and then do his little walk down, 2, 0 to 4. And then instead of hitting the open, we're going to quickly start trilling between the B on the 2nd fret and the 4th fret. And he also will start pulling off between 4, 2, and 0. He kind of starts off, you know, he starts off just trilling between the 2 notes. And then you can start doing all 3 before he just starts tremolo strumming the B power chord. And he does that for a long time while Kirk goes off and does his little lead outro. But that's all that Hetfield's doing. So just remember, he's just following that chord progression for the whole outro, right? B, A, G, A. So that's basically it, right? As we get out of that double time. B, A, G, A. Then you throw in his little thing. And just end on tremolo strumming a B. So as you can see, not too hard to get through. And now let's talk about Kirk's lead over top of that outro. He likes to play this, you know, that climbing arpeggio pull-off thing that we had on the album version. He uses that over the last double time rotation to get into the free time outro. And that works really well. And that's exactly the way it is on the album. Climbs all the way up. And even ends it on that 22nd fret bend the way it was on the album. Right? Releasing the 22nd fret to the 19th fret. And then he even sticks in the first couple beats of this sequence that we had before, but it's going to branch off from there. But start with that sequence, 22, 20, 19, and then 20, 19, down to 22 on the B string. And there's a pull off there on this live version too, right? So, okay, now from there, we're going to do a couple of falling thirds. So we go 19 on the high string, 20 on B, and then 22, 19 on B. So we've got this. And he speeds up there a little bit too. Now, remember that the timings are slightly different every time. I did watch a few of the outro solos. All the ideas are essentially the same, but the timings I would notate differently every time if I was to tab it out. But even though the ideas are the same, you know, because it's free time, it's a little bit different every time. So don't be too concerned with nailing the timings. It's really just a representation, right? But just nail the ideas, kind of understand where these ideas are coming from. So after we do that, we just have, it's just B minor pentatonic, right? On that fret there, on the 19th fret, that's B. So we just have a pentatonic lick straight out of that here. We go 21 on G, 19 on B, and then back to the G string, 21, 19, down to D, 21, back up to G, 19, 21, and then bend that 21 1.5 steps and slide it, right? Okay, so put that all together. Okay, then we slide in to the 16th fret on G. For our next lick, okay? So 16 on G up to 14 on B, then 17 on B, bend it, hit it again and release, down to 15, come down to 14, so, then back to 15, then a little hammer pull from 14, 15, down to 16 on G, up to 14 again on B, and then bend 16 on G, release it, pull off to 14, back to 16, and end on 14. That's all just hammer pulls there. We're not picking those 16 and 14 as we bounce back and forth. So it's like this. Okay, then we get into a cool little arpeggio. Okay, so he picks up into that with a 16 on D and 14 on G. And then we're just going up a B minor arpeggio here. Okay, so we're going 16, 15, 14 on G, B, and E. Pull off from 19 to 14. Back down on 15 and 16. And then we're gonna hit 14 on G. Slide down to 13, so we've got this. Now 14 on D, 16 on A. 12, 14 and 12, stay on that A string, 14, 12, 14, 16, come back up to the D string, 14, 16, then up to 14 on G, back to 14 on D. Okay, so that whole arpeggio together. We do a slide, and we do his rhythm part that coincides with James doing. Right? James does that, so we come down and go along with James, harmonize with him. Okay, so the only thing to note there, he puts in a couple of pull-offs. Rather than picking all those notes, he'll hit the 2nd fret, and then come up to the D on 4, pull off to 2, and then pull off to open as well. And then does his little rundown. And then he bends that up 1.5 steps to match the A that would be found on the 5th fret. And then he hits a B power chord and gets into the last little bit. Okay, so let's just talk about that. After he hits the B power chord, he's just doing a B major arpeggio. So it's kind of a, you know, a B major chord over top of a B minor type thing. So it's kind of a cool effect. But he slides into 7 on the bottom string, 6 and 9 on A, 9 on D, 8 on G, and 7 on B. And now we're just taking some notes out of the pentatonic scale here. Bar the 12th fret on the 2 high strings, down to the 10 on the 2 high strings, 9 on the 2 high strings. And then we start with barring the 7th frets, but do a quick little hammer just to get the 9th fret on the B string. And then we jump down to get the B on the 9th fret of D. So we've got this. Then we just got some notes out of the pentatonic scale. Do a quick hammer from 7 onto 9 of the G string. 9 on A. They do that little hammer trick to 9 on the D string, and then 7 on the low string B. And then we can fret our power chord, tremolo strum it, and live they'll strum that for a long time still, you know. And then sit there and let it turn to feedback and all that. But for all intents and purposes, that's the whole outro. Well, that was epic. Thanks for watching this fade to black guitar tutorial. If you made it all the way to the end and you've learned everything, then you are a true master of fade to black. And if you want to master every Metallica song, remember to hit like and subscribe because I'm going through their entire catalog. More is on the way soon. And until next time, keep shredding.